less doctrine, more spirit. Less dogma, more how we choose to live our lives. And even a shift away from belief. Like I feel like Christianity has been so focused on belief, but belief is slippery and ever changing. And I love to see people leaning into how they practice. So for me, less belief, more practice, more authenticity in how we live our lives. I think I see a space for community. So I see the way forward as being very community focused, but not so community focused that people lose their individuality, that there's no room for their own voice. So I am really sensing the way forward in our spiritual circles and those of us who are following Jesus in whatever way, shape, or form that may take for each individual as being a very authentic individual path, but one that's also embedded within community, with accountability, with co-journeyers, with companions along the way. So one of the things I do is I help Jesus followers embrace, incorporate, live metaphysically. That is akin, it's a close kissing cousin to mysticism, and that it's looking at our interior lives, connecting directly our souls, our bodies, our spirits directly to God. Whereas I cannot create a mystical experience for anyone. I can teach people metaphysical practices, real concrete practices that they can do in their everyday lives. That helps them connect to the spirit world that is seemingly just out of sight, but is very real. And we have like real evidence for in our lives. So that has to do with like chakras. It has to do with even fancy things like past lives and meditation, all of these kind of practices. So for the way forward, I think if Christians can open up their Jesus mind to the practices that we have been told are not okay, and really explore the why of that. Is that a belief that I have because someone told me to have that belief? Or is there a practice that may exist out there that can help me be closer to God, that I can actually explore and embrace in my own life? So for me, the way forward, it doesn't necessarily have to do with someone embracing a practice of clearing their chakras, although I think it's great. Let's all do that together. I think our individual lives in the world are a better place when we are doing that. But that's not nearly as important as the attitude that I bring to the word chakras or the practice of clearing my chakras. So in general, I think what I'm loving about the kind of work that I do is that I get to show people how to do things like clear their chakras, but also create an environment and an attitude where Jesus followers are able to engage in those practices without guilt, without shame, and without giving up Jesus. And so that Jesus followers can continue to claim that identity, again, in whatever way, shape, or form resonates with them. And where we're not becoming all the same. I don't think that we're all, what's the right way to say it? It's not that Christians should embrace Buddhism. I don't know how to be a Buddhist. I do know how to be a Jesus follower, but the practices of Buddhism that are there to teach me, I want to learn from those. And I want to embrace those, and hopefully vice versa with my other interreligious. We're not seeking better answers or answers about our beliefs, because that's not always very helpful. But asking a better question is really the golden road that opens us up to all the possibilities that are present, that are part of the spiritual makeup of this planet that we all happen to live on and share, called Earth. And I think that Jesus himself was so great at asking those kinds of questions and doing so from within his own tradition. Like he never abandoned his own tradition. And so in the same way, I try to model myself, imperfectly as I am, on the example that Jesus gave, where within my tradition, within my framework of Christianity, my framework gets a lot bigger as I ask better questions about what that means. And I'm able to dialogue with people who are seemingly very different, but we might have a shared spiritual experience. Yeah, so I think asking those better questions from within the context of what we do know and expanding what we know is way more fun, actually, than articulating a more concrete belief. The challenges are all human challenges, right? I'm not sure that God feels necessarily challenged by any of this, or the spirit doesn't necessarily feel challenged by any of this. But as a human, I find transitions really difficult. And I do think we're in the middle of a massive human transitions right now, in terms of pandemic, in terms of technology, in terms of trust. People have lost trust in institutions that should have been the most trustworthy institutions, church, government, you name it. And so I think some of the challenges we're going to face are structural as people are departing churches. Where is it that they go? How do we form community? Being a lone ranger as a spiritual person, I don't believe works. It means that we're probably not asking the right questions, and we're certainly not in dialogue if we're a lone ranger. So part of the challenge is finding community that works and is authentic. Ways that this can go wildly wrong is people can find community and they can end up with like a cult leader. Right. Seemingly they're all asking good questions, they're all doing their best, but they end up with someone with no training and is a charismatic cult leader. On the other hand, you can end up in a toxic church where the leaders have very little training, but they have big opinions on how to do something that they think is right within the narrow God box. So for those who are remaining in the evangelical traditions, I think they need more training. Evangelical traditions have not given pastors very good training, and a lot of it is only their emotions are guiding them. They have very little pastoral training. I've seen just train wrecks happen. For progressive Christian leaders, they have too much training. There's so many hoops to jump through that it's hard to get qualified people in communities where they can actually serve. And then that leaves a lot of people who have departed both traditions not served at all. So how do we form community? How do we do that authentically? And I think dealing with the mass trauma that people have experienced from toxic church life is underrated. It's underrated by both progressive and evangelical traditions, and neither one are dealing with it very well. Neither one are holding enough space for that. So if we could have space to be held in community that's not focused on dogma, that's not focused on doctrine, but is focused on people's authentic spiritual connection, that would be like the challenge, I think. We don't have training on how to do that quite yet. So I don't know what the solution to that is, but for me, that's one of the challenges that I see. And this is, I'm someone who's taught the progressive Christian leaders. I'm part of that community. And at the same time, I see it's not enough. More training isn't the answer. More training is an answer, but more training the way we've been doing it isn't the answer, but greater community, greater authenticity, I feel is what's needed. And I've certainly seen people out there who are equipped to do this work. And so I'm championing them as they are starting to form that community. But also people don't know where to look. I get to work with people all the time who are asking really good questions, who are opening up their spirit, who are having deep spiritual experiences, and they give me hope. Every single one of them gives me hope. Every student I've ever worked with has given me hope for the future. And those students range in age from youth to like 90. So there's no age limit on that. I think in the middle of all of our very fractured society right now, people have just been on edge for the past, since 9/11. We have been a people on edge. We've gotten really frayed. The pandemic has brought out the best in a lot of people and really the worst in a lot of people. Within the United States, a very divided political economy has been really, really tough. I know it's been tough for me. I think it's just tough on everyone. No matter what side of the political aisle you might be on. So where I find hope is in people who are able to engage in their own care and in authentic conversation. So when I see people make the shift from just reacting to a thoughtful response, that gives me hope. And when I see people be sort of dismayed at the rampant kind of societal illnesses that we have, and be dismayed at that, but not in judgment, but in compassion and care, that gives me hope. And I tend to surround myself with those people. So I don't want to live in a bubble, but I know that we are out there, and that this is Christ's work. It is Christ's work. Christ met people who were at the end of their rope and gave them hope. So when I see people engage in their own care enough to be able to be that lifeline for someone else, yeah, that gives me hope. And I get to work with people all day long who are doing that. So I might have a skewed perspective of hope because I see so many awesome people who are doing it for themselves and for others. I think it's super important, because when we're not in that state of compassion for the ills of the world, we're probably doing one of two things. We're probably disengaged and apathetic, and just not caring. And, I've been in that state before. It's a natural human response to hardships around us. Disengage, make the problem kind of go away because we're not paying attention to it. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other is that we're so overly identified, and those of us who are deeply empathic or empaths, where we really feel the emotions of others, are so embroiled in it that we can't see a way out. Compassion is actually the middle road to all of that is the healthiest of all of the responses. Because when we see with compassion, we're not in the space of judgment, and we get out of the space of feeling what others are feeling, which ultimately doesn't help them. Right? If I only feel the pain of the world, but I can't transform that energy into something that can help the world, then I just become embroiled in that big mess. There's a part of me that wants to not lose touch with that. I want to be able to identify that pain, whether I understand it or not. But then I want to transform that to compassion, because then I enter into that non-judgmental space that Jesus modeled for us. And then I'm able to do something, whether that's hold space for people, whether it's pray for people, whether it's give someone water or clothing, or help be part of the creation of new systems in which people are not suffering. And I can only do that from a place of compassion. I can't do it from a place of over-identifying, because then I'm just a mess and I need the help. And I can't do it from a place of apathy, because then I don't care at all. So compassion is actually the higher kind of middle ground, I think, for all of us. And it means that I'm feeling, but I'm not so stuck in my own feelings that I become the center of the problem. I think my final word is that there is no final word. We're all a work in progress. So wherever you might be on this journey, I invite you to receive yourself actually with great compassion, and maybe even give yourself a hug for having made it to this part of your journey, because it's really extraordinary. And the fact that we're all here connected, whether even through differences of time and space, is pretty cool in and of itself. And I encourage everyone to keep on asking better questions, seeking the community that will help you the most on your journey. And I think the question I'm always asking myself is, why do I believe that? Who taught me that? Does that belong to me, or does that belong to someone else? So whenever we're struggling with an old belief or a new belief, or an old practice or a new practice, that's something that I offer to everyone, is to identify where any resistance might be coming from, so that we can let that dissolve and emerge into our new selves. I think we grow by increments. And so it's Thomas Keating kind of describes that when he sits in meditation and in centering prayer, God comes through and helps sand off some of the rough edges. And then that rough edge becomes smooth, but then you encounter a new one. So we're always on this circle of expansion, finding our new rough edges. And that's actually part of the fun. I think sometimes we have the mistaken belief that we're gonna run out of rough edges, but we never do. Or at least I haven't yet met the human who does. Maybe Jesus or Buddha did, but we as humans, as kind of mere mortals down here, we always have rough edges. So I invite everyone to embrace those rough edges, ask the question of why do I believe this, and then move on to your next new rough edge and find out what's there, and get curious and explore it.